Well guys, we are back for another episode of the Liberal Asshole Show, episode 84, and what are today's topics?
Legal Eagles Insurrection versus First Amendment video, Republicans terrifying Project 2025, gamers raging over Starfield Pronoun options, states trying to disqualify Trump, Pope criticizes American conservatives, Biden destroys Republicans on abortion, and Trump refuses to prove he won 2020.
Alright, so what should we start off with first?
Let's start with Legal Eagle.
Alright, so of course, we talked about in the last episode, we mentioned this video that Legal Eagle covered is Trump dead in insurrection with January 6th? Or does he have the First Amendment right to talk about how he thinks the election was rigged? Which, of course, that's the argument of, this goes against his First Amendment rights to say that the election was rigged and all that. And, of course, it's BS. And now, we have Legal Eagle, one of the best lawyers on YouTube, talking about this now. And, oh boy, this is almost 25 minutes, but it's pretty well detailed, hopefully, so let's get into it.
It's a witch hunt. It's free speech. It's political activity. Won't someone please think of the First Amendment? Special Prosecutor Jack Smith has indicted Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. for conspiracy to subvert the presidential election results, and Trump is predictably not too happy about it. He tweeted out on Truth Social, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." In response, the DOJ filed a motion for protective order that would prevent Trump from disclosing discovery materials to the public. Now, Trump says this motion was actually a blanket gag order that would prohibit him from exercising his free speech, and a hearing was held on August 11th. Now, in addition to all the motion practice that's happening before trial, Trump and his lawyers say that everything that Trump said in the run-up to January 6th is protected political speech and therefore can't be the basis of criminal charges. Now, Trump has said a lot of things in the context of January 6th. Does he actually have a First Amendment free speech defense? Well, to start with, speech is generally protected under the First Amendment unless it falls within one of the few categories of unprotected speech. Now, we'll get into those categories in a few minutes because when you're talking about Trump, those categories actually come up with quite a bit of frequency. But first, let's talk about why Trump says his words and actions are protected speech. The Supreme Court considers political and ideological speech to be at the core of the First Amendment, including speech concerning, quote, politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion. Now, Trump says that he's being persecuted for political speech. In the indictment, the prosecutors accused him of communicating with other people in an attempt to overturn the election. And here's how the alleged conspiracies worked. Before the general election, the political parties from each state chose their own potential electoral college electors. After the votes are in, each state prepares certificates of ascertainment that are authenticated with a government signature, and the indictment accuses Trump and his allies of conspiring to prepare fake certificates in 7 states that Trump lost: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
Which we covered, I think, in the last episode, which, by the way, illegal.
Exactly,
and Trump's plan depended on Vice President Mike Pence using those certificates to block or delay Congress from recognizing Biden's victory.
He can't do that either, and that's why he didn't bother, because he knew he couldn't do it.
Now, Trump's lawyer, John Lauro, told CNN that, quote, "This is an attack on free speech and political advocacy, and there's nothing that's more protected under the First Amendment than political speech." Now, I agree with Lauro that Trump generally has a right to lie about the election results forever if he wants to. However, Lauro goes even further than that, saying that Trump had a free speech right to ask Pence and others to take action on his behalf. Lauro often defended Trump by claiming that his extra-legal demands were aspirational.
Hold on one second. That was an aspirational ask.
Now, Trump claims that there's no harm in just asking Pence to do something that might hypothetically break the law or at least be against the law. Lauro says that the Biden administration has criminalized the free speech of prior administration and that it is particularly egregious because it's happening while there is a political election happening. To Trump, it looks like the government is trying to stop him from expressing his political opinions. Now, Trump's defenders used the same defense during his second Senate impeachment trial. The House January 6th committee recommended that Trump be charged with violating the seditious conspiracy statute because of the speech he gave to the protesters at the Ellipse. The seditious conspiracy law, 18 U.S.C. 2383 and 2384, make it a crime when someone, quote, incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States. Now, historically, the government has used sedition charges to shut down political dissent, especially during times of war. And Trump is right that we don't want the government to persecute people because of their political speech. But that's why today it's extremely hard to convict someone of inciting violence based on their opinions. We've covered incitement law a bunch of times on this channel. It's very difficult to prove under the Brandenburg test. And although the First Amendment does not protect speech that incites imminent lawless action, it does protect speech that advocates overthrowing the government in abstract terms. Whether the speech really does incite imminent lawless action is a hard nut to crack, which is probably why Special Prosecutor Jack Smith did not charge Trump with seditious conspiracy. Most people think that he probably did this to avoid Trump's First Amendment defense. But Smith still used Trump's words as evidence that he committed other crimes. Now, is he allowed to do that? Well, the government anticipated that Trump would make the case about free speech. So the indictment begins by making the distinction between First Amendment and criminal conduct. Quote, the defendant had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he won. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as by seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits, challenging ballots and procedures. Now, this is the Justice Department, so you are allowed to take their statements of fealty to the First Amendment with a grain of salt. But Trump lost the lawsuits that he filed, and the indictment says that Trump tried to overturn the election by illegal means. Quote, shortly after Election Day, the defendant also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. Now, this is the heart of the disagreement between Trump and the Department of Justice. Trump World's argument boils down to the idea that words can't be crimes. And that definitely misunderstands the issue in most of criminal law. As former Trump Attorney General Bill Barr explains.
As the indictment says, they're not attacking his First Amendment right. He can say whatever he wants. He can even lie. He can even tell people that the election was stolen when he knew better. But that does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. All conspiracies involve speech, and all fraud involves speech.
Now, Barr...
And just to add on too, I think we covered in the last episode too, or sometime recently, there was a memo that Trump did like a week before the election where he said that he will deny the election even if he loses and do all this stuff a whole week before the election, all that. It was his plan for the entire time. And guys, remember, he even said this back in 2016 when he ran against Hillary that he was going to deny remember, he would not acknowledge if he lost would he concede. Now, of course, we didn't see what he did because he won, but then we saw what happened when he lost. So Trump just cannot take a loss ever.
Barr is saying that there's no First Amendment protection for speech made in service of a crime. So let's talk about that. Now, not all speech is protected by the First Amendment. For example, defamatory statements are not protected. Now, Trump knows this because, for some reason, he's always saying he wants to make it easier for people to sue for defamation. And, he does actually file a fair number of defamation lawsuits. And earlier this year, he lost a defamation case after E. Jean Carroll sued him for claiming that he did not rape her. And on the other side of the coin, Trump has actually won defamation suits against people like Stormy Daniels and was successfully able to file an anti-SLAPP motion against her. Now, false statements may form the basis of other legally cognizable harms, such as fraud, false advertising, or perjury. And Trump has been sued for fraud before. In 2016, he settled a lawsuit which alleged that Trump University made false claims about being affiliated with accredited universities, lied about Trump handpicking instructors, and lied about passing on valuable real estate secrets. Now, that kind of commercial speech has fewer First Amendment protections when someone makes false statements. And if the government can prove it has a substantial interest in making sure consumers aren't deceived, it can regulate certain types of commercial speech. And on top of that, things that qualify as speech often constitute what are called legal acts. Yeah, think about it. Speech is often how we accomplish stuff. We tell people what we want and what we want them to do. And generally, the First Amendment doesn't protect speech, quote, used as an integral part of conduct in violation of a valid criminal statute. Now, this is why the government is allowed to prohibit solicitation to commit a crime, or conspiracy to commit a crime, or impersonating a government officer. In each of these crimes, it involves speech, but a prosecutor can use a person's words as evidence that they committed that crime. For example, if a bank robber demands that a bank teller hand over the money, the statements aren't protected speech. Those words form the basis of the crime that's being committed. And under Trump's interpretation of the First Amendment, the bank robber could argue that when he gave the teller a note demanding money, it was merely a suggestion, aspirational, to use Laura's words. And if we accept Trump's free speech argument, it's hard to see how it would ever be legal for the government to punish perjury, which punishes a person for lying under oath, and other crimes like knowingly making a false statement to law enforcement in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1001 would also be off the books. And unfortunately for Trump, soliciting another individual to commit a crime is not protected by the First Amendment. For example, in United States versus Williams, the Supreme Court considered whether the PROTECT Act abridged First Amendment freedom of speech by outlawing the pandering of material that is believed to be child pornography. Justice Scalia, writing for the majority, concluded that, quote, offers to engage in illegal transactions are categorically excluded from First Amendment protection. The court observed that, quote, to be sure, there remains an important distinction between a proposal to engage in illegal activity and the abstract advocacy of illegality. Scalia concluded that the PROTECT Act was not overbroad because it, quote, does not prohibit advocacy of child pornography, but only offers to provide or requests to obtain it. The opinion goes on to say that, quote, many long-established criminal prosecutions, such as laws against conspiracy, incitement, and solicitation, criminalize speech, commercial or not, that is intended to induce or commence illegal activities. And another case that's on point is the 1915 case of United States versus Mosley that dealt with a conspiracy by 2 Oklahoma County Election Board officials to omit certain legal votes from the official count. The men were charged with conspiracy under 18 U.S.C. 241, which is one of the statutes that Trump allegedly violated. And in that case, the court observed that although 241 was enacted to stop the Ku Klux Klan, quote, the statute dealt at the time with all federal rights of all citizens and protected them all and still continues to do so. The county officials engaged in multiple conspiracies. First, they agreed not to count certain votes. Second, they met in secret without the knowledge of the third member of the Board of Elections for the purpose of carrying out the conspiracy. And third, they committed overt acts towards achieving their goals. The 2 men met and used speech to hatch their plan, but that doesn't mean that their actual conspiracy was protected by the First Amendment. And to be clear, Trump really can't be punished for saying, I think I won, and Pence should block the certification. But he can be charged for soliciting another person to commit a crime. So it would follow that if Trump solicited fake electors to submit forged certificates with the goal of stopping the certification, then it's fine to charge him with conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding under 18 U.S.C. 1512. And the government still has to prove all the elements of the case for each of those charges. Laurel suggests that a person cannot be guilty of conspiracy if their verbal acts solely consist of political speech protected by the Constitution, which has a kernel of truth, but is also kind of wrong. He relies on Hammerschmidt versus United States, where the Supreme Court overturned a conviction against Thomas Hammerschmidt and 12 others who had been handing out pamphlets urging men not to register for the Selective Service Act. Now, the act authorized the government to temporarily expand the military through conscription, and the men were convicted of conspiracy to defraud the United States in violation of what is now 18 U.S.C. 371. By the way, there are a lot of First Amendment cases that deal with very, very dubious speech-related acts. But the issue in Hammerschmidt was whether the men used trickery or deceit to encourage people to evade the draft. And the court found that their conduct did not include deceit. Handing out pamphlets was simply, quote, open defiance of the governmental purpose to enforce a law by urging persons subject to it to disobey it, which is not fraud in this sense. The case didn't refer to the First Amendment or discuss whether political speech can contribute to a criminal conspiracy. But the Hammerschmidt case referred to a 1910 case called Hawes versus Henkel, which might be more analogous to Trump's situation. In that case, Moses Hawes and others were charged with a conspiracy to defraud the United States by attempting to bribe a statistician in the Department of Agriculture to give them cotton crop reports before they were officially released to the public with the goal of engaging in market speculation. The statistician was going to, quote, falsify one of these official cotton crop reports, of which fact his associates were to be advised in advance. In Hammerschmidt, the men were handing out political pamphlets urging people to break the law. That was political speech. In Hawes, the men conspired to secretly manipulate cotton crop reports, including by falsifying data to allow the conspirators to engage in market speculation. Now, I'm sure Jack Smith is going to argue that the fact pattern seems closer to Hawes because it involves governmental officials using deceit and trickery to stop the certification of the election of the joint session of Congress on January 6th. Now, to be sure, Trump did engage in political speech, but for the most part, Jack Smith's indictment avoided charging Trump just for making speeches and posting tweets. Instead, it seems like he tried to charge speech acts that urge people, including state and federal officials, to break the law by submitting fraudulent electoral certificates to Congress and NARA. Now, the Georgia indictment, on the other hand, is more explicitly based on Trump's various speech acts, which may present a problem. And there are other cases that Trump might rely on to argue that he had no intent for anyone to commit unlawful acts. For example, in NAACP versus Claiborne Hardware, the Supreme Court ruled that an economic boycott is a form of constitutionally protected expression, even if violence is threatened as a means of achieving a group objective. The case involved an economic boycott by African Americans against white merchants operating in Claiborne County, Mississippi. And the boycott included nonviolent picketing, but there were also acts of threats of violence. And in 1969, white merchants sued the NAACP for damages. And the court held that the non-violent elements of the protesters' activities were protected by the First Amendment. The NAACP wasn't liable for the consequences of their non-violent activity. Effectively, the court separated out the non-violent activity that was protected by the First Amendment and the potentially violent activity that could give rise to damages. And the court ruled that, quote, for liability to be imposed by reason of association alone, it is necessary to establish that the group itself possessed unlawful goals and that the individual held specific intent to further these illegal aims. Persuasion must be, quote, directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and likely to incite or produce such action in order for it to be considered a crime. Now, in the aftermath of Claiborne hardware, lower court decisions drew a line between advocacy and urging illegal action. Speech urging illegal action was unprotected by the First Amendment in some contexts. For example, in Rice versus Paladin, the Fourth Circuit ruled that a publisher of a book, Hitman, a technical manual for independent contractors, could be liable for civilly aiding and abetting a crime after a contract killer used the book to murder 3 people. The court held that the, quote, provision of instructions that aid and abet another in the commission of a criminal offense is not protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment doesn't bar civil liability for speech that the plaintiff can demonstrate was performed with specific intent. The court drew a distinction between speech that was advocacy and speech that was aiding and abetting others by providing the means to commit the crime. And the court said that the Hitman book was not advocacy. It was an instruction manual without relevant communicative value. But the Hitman case is unusual because Paladin, for reasons that I won't go into, stipulated that it intended the book to be used by criminals and would-be criminals, and that it intended and had knowledge that the book would be used to execute the crime of murder for hire. But for procedural reasons, there was only one issue before the court, and that was whether the First Amendment acted as a complete bar to the plaintiff's claims. And of course, unlike the Paladin publisher, Trump is not going to stipulate that he had specific intent and knowledge that his co-conspirators intended to commit crimes. But the government is alleging exactly that Trump knew his speeches and interviews and phone calls and memos were in service of an objective that was against the law,
especially in Georgia
election result. So whereas in Claiborne hardware, the boycotters didn't intend violence and thus were not liable for their First Amendment protected speech, Trump intended, so says the government, for others to break the law on his behalf. And I'm sure Jack Smith will use Trump's speeches to prove that he had that specific intent. And of course, Trump is going on trial for conspiracy, and the First Circuit Court of Appeals decided a case called U.S. versus Spock that involved a letter written by professionals who were opposed to the Vietnam War. These professionals, including famous pediatrician Benjamin Spock, wrote a letter called A Call to Resist Illegitimate Authority, and some of them attended protests which advocated for the burning of draft cards. Spock and 3 others were convicted of criminal conspiracy. The court reversed Spock's conviction largely because he did not have specific intent to further the illegal aspects of the letter. The court observed that, quote, it is true that he was one of the drafters of the call, but this does not evidence the necessary intent to adhere to its illegal aspects. Nor does his admission to a government agent that he was willing to do anything asked for further opposition to the war. Specific intent is not established by such a generalization. Whatever the reason, the fact is that his speech was limited to condemnation of the war and the draft and lacked any words or content of counseling. The jury could not find prescribed advocacy from the mere fact, which he freely admitted that he hoped the frequent stating of his views might give young men courage to take active steps in draft resistance. This is a natural consequence of vigorous speech. So this looks like a better argument for Trump, that he, like Dr. Spock, repeatedly stated his views publicly in the hopes that it might give courage to people to take some action, but that he lacked knowledge of illegal efforts on his behalf and the intent to see them succeed. Now, Smith's indictment says that Trump's activities included both legal and illegal means of achieving a second term, despite losing the election. But Trump will argue that he never tried to further any illegal activities. What this all boils down to is that the government must prove that Trump had the mens rea, the necessary mental state, to commit the crimes he's accused of. Now, this sounds complicated, but it's actually how all of criminal law works. The exact same act can be perfectly innocent or a crime based on the mental state of the defendant. Now, as you can probably tell, Trump and his co-defendants are going to need a good lawyer. But if you need a great lawyer, my firm, the Eagle Team, can help. If your loved one has suffered from cancer, my Eagle Team, for the drunk law professor. If that person to run for president of the United States is, well, tricky. Or as Ken White more colorfully put it, basically it's a nightmare law school exam by a sadistic drunk law professor. Now, the government said that the order was necessary to, quote, allow the government to begin producing that discovery, much of which includes sensitive and confidential information. The government respectfully moves the court for entry of the attached proposed protective order governing the disclosure of discovery. Now, mind you, when you have a criminal defendant, that defendant is entitled to see the evidence that's going to be presented against them. This process of turning over information is called discovery. And the point of discovery in the criminal context is to inform the defendant about the evidence that's going to be used against them. And as you might imagine, there's a lot of sensitive information here. Quote, materials containing personally identifying information as identified in Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 49.1, Rule 6 materials including subpoena returns, witness testimony, and related exhibits presented to the grand jury, materials obtained through sealed search warrants and 2703D orders, sealed orders obtained by the government's filter team related to the case, recordings, transcripts, interview reports, and related exhibits of witness interviews, and sensitive materials obtained from other governmental entities. And the idea is that the protective order, quote, allows the defendant prompt and effective use of discovery materials in connection with his defense, including by showing discovery materials to witnesses who also agree to abide by the order's terms. The idea is that the discovery would be given to Trump, but he wouldn't be allowed to share it with the public. Prosecutors said, quote, such a restriction is particularly important in this case because the defendant has previously issued public statements on social media regarding witnesses, judges, attorneys, and others associated with legal matters pending against him. And not surprisingly, as evidence, the government referenced Trump's Truth Social screed. They said, quote, if the defendant were to begin issuing public posts using details, or for example, grand jury transcripts, obtained in discovery here, it could have a harmful chilling effect on witnesses or adversely affect the fair administration of justice in this case. In response, Trump's lawyer said, quote, the government...
And that actually happened, too, with, like, threats to the judges and all that, which Kyle covered.
Does not explain how a post on a different topic, which does not include or describe sensitive information, suggests President Trump might disseminate such information in the future.
Which he
and Trump's
has
lawyer
already,
said that the need to
because he
protect that
can't
information
out
does not require a blanket gag order over all documents produced by the government. And their response brief accused Jack Smith's prosecutors of leaking evidence, saying that the DOJ posed, quote, the greater risk of improper disclosure. Now, Judge Chutkan had a hearing to resolve the parties' inability to agree on the scope of the protective order. And after she issued the protective order, Trump said that he might or might not comply with the judge's order.
Do you plan to comply with the judge's order regarding the latest indictment? We'll have to take a look at the order.
So what were they arguing about? Well, the first big issue was whether all information the government obtained during the investigation should be covered by the protective order, as the prosecution wanted. But the judge was not persuaded that the government proved that all information gathered in the case should fall under the protective order. And the judge ruled that the government can designate certain materials as sensitive, but not all of them. But notably, the judge agreed with the government that every single person interviewed by prosecutors is a potential witness and is therefore sensitive information. The judge suggested that Trump might release evidence about Mike Pence in order to denigrate him as a witness. Quote, the defendant's desire to respond to political opponents has to yield. There are limits. This is a criminal case. The need for this case to proceed in a normal order means there are going to be limits on the defendant's speech. The judge was also concerned that witnesses could be intimidated by, quote, members of the public, also who are not
which is,
bound
like
by
I already said, it's already happened.
Now, Laurel pleaded with the judge to consider that Trump needed to be able to discuss everything listed in paragraph 8 on the debate stage. But Judge Chutkan said that the political campaign would have no bearing on any of her decisions in the case. She chided Laurel for, quote, conflating what your client needs to defend himself and what he wants to do politically. Your client's defense has to happen in the courtroom, not on the internet. To the extent your client wants to make statements on the internet, he has to yield to witness security. Now, the second major issue was whether Trump would be allowed to see all the discovery in the case and what he'd be allowed to do with that material. And here, Judge Chutkan fashioned a compromise. Trump is allowed to review sensitive information without his legal team present in the room, but the team must be present to retrieve the materials as soon as Trump exits the room. If Trump takes notes, his lawyers must review them to assure that he did not write down sensitive personal information. Trump is also not permitted to have an electronic device with him that would allow him to take a picture or photocopy the document. Quote, if the defendant takes notes regarding sensitive materials, defense counsel must inspect those notes to ensure that the defendant has not copied down personally identifying information. Now, this puts a lot of pressure on the lawyers to make sure that their client is complying with the order. Now, with normal clients, this isn't such a big deal, but this is obviously Donald Trump that we're dealing with here. And things are getting especially interesting because in the wake of the protective order, Trump has arguably directed speech at a witness in Georgia saying, quote, I am reading reports that failed former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, will be testifying before the Fulton County grand jury. He shouldn't, and then goes on even further. Now, that's not great. Now, while some commentators have argued that this constitutes witness tampering, the Georgia witness tampering statute is mainly concerned with threats and bribes and likely doesn't apply here. And Judge Chutkan's protective order prevents Trump and his legal team from disclosing sensitive matters revealed in discovery, but it doesn't really touch on statements like that. Trump's condition of his release do actually bar him from harassing or intimidating witnesses, but that would likely only apply to witnesses in his DC case. So given all the gray areas here, I wouldn't expect that any of the judges here to be the first to rush to jail Trump or hold Trump in contempt over his social media posts. But right after the Duncan-related post, he also targeted Judge Chutkan by commenting on her past in-court statements, which is at the very least likely to piss off the judge. Though in fairness, it's not a great statement from the judge. It's a gratuitous reference to Trump, who wasn't on trial in that particular January 6th case. But I'm sure that these are only just the first in a long string of free speech hypotheticals that would drive any student in con law to insane, or a YouTube lawyer, as the case may be. But all this just makes my brain hurt, so I think I'll just sit back and enjoy a delicious meal delivered straight to my door.
And
which
so
I can get.
that is it for the video. So yeah, what do you guys say about all of that?
I'm not surprised. It's quite interesting, honestly. It's not surprising
Sponsored.
that
Fact.
not it there. I think the advice for Trump would be if you don't want to wind up making things impossible for yourself, shut the fuck up.
Man, but that's impossible for a furry orangutan. I don't know why it's so hard. But yeah, here's what it boiled down to. Trump does have this free speech rights to say that the election's rigged and all that. He can contest and all that. That's fine. But what he couldn't do is what he did. Incited January 6th. Did that call that Attorney General over in Georgia to try and make him get more votes. And, of course, did illegal electoral people and such, which I think we covered last time out. He can't do that stuff. And he did. And that's why, hopefully, he gets locked up and can't run again 2024. That'd be so hilarious. So, yeah. On to the next topic.
Ban him until 2030, and Trump will be dead by then.
Yes. It was the next two elections. All right, so then, on to the next topic.
Project 2025.
It's like
genocide of LGBT people, the end of same-sex marriage, potentially the end of interracial and interfaith marriages as well.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
So, I'm sure you know the Heritage Foundation, of course.
Yep.
A stupid, heck, far-right political advocacy group that's involved in, like, every single Republican president, all the way back, like, since Reagan and such. Like, they're a loathsome, and I mean loathsome, organization. They just did their own plan called Plan 2025, which they want to implement policies if Republicans win in 2025. This is not just Trump winning, this is any Republican winning. Yep. And the stuff they say on there is full-on authoritarian and fascist. And, oh boy, it is vicious. And when you hear all this, anyone that supports these people should forever lose support for them whatsoever. And vote progressive, because that's the only valid option.
We are going to be prepared day one, January 2025, to hit the ground running as conservatives to really help the next president. This task in 2024 is too big for any one think tank. This has to be a movement. And what we've done is use our convening power here at Heritage to bring the entire movement together. But what we're doing is systematically preparing to march into office and bring a new army of aligned, trained, and essentially weaponized conservatives ready to do battle against the deep state.
Yeah, by committing genocide.
The Heritage Foundation and dozens of right-wing dark money organizations have come together to formulate Project 2025, which is a set of personnel and policy recommendations intended to guide the next Republican administration through their first 180 days in office. And if they successfully pressure the president to adopt everything on their wish list, America would look like a completely different country. They would dismantle the administrative state, expand the power of the executive, enact nationwide internet censorship, ban porn, and politically imprison LGBTQ plus people potentially. And should the next Republican president choose...
Hell no. We know, hell no. The Heritage Foundation ain't just against same-sex marriage, remember? They're against interracial. Yep, they're against interracial and interfaith as well.
To pursue this unconstitutional agenda, he'd have the backing of the Supreme Court most likely.
Oh, actually,
now, all of this is moot if A...
You heard of the conspiracy theory that, had the thought that, Judge Clarence Thomas secretly wants to, hopes that interracial marriage gets overturned so that he can divorce his wife?
Nope, but I wouldn't be surprised. But guess what, Clarence? It's not going to get you out of your corruption scandal and hopefully get your ass out.
A Republican loses the 2024 election, or B, a Republican wins but chooses to ignore this agenda entirely. But if the Federalist Society has taught us anything, it's that Republicans always listen to well-funded right-wing think tanks because those are the organizations that their donors send money to, so why wouldn't they listen? And Ed Corrigan, who's one of the architects of Project 2025, casually explained why they're very confident that this is not going to be ignored.
This has been really a team effort. You got 50 different conservative organizations have contributed to this. That's what makes this a strong product. No presidential campaign or president is going to be able to ignore it.
no presidential campaign or president is going to be able to ignore it. And he's right about that. He said it in a very nonchalant way, but it's still very ominous nonetheless. But let's break it down. What is Project 2025? Well, the first order of business would be for them to expand the power of the presidency in order to lay the groundwork for unconstitutional policies that they really want to implement.
So much for small government, am I right, peoples?
Bryn Tannehill of Dame Magazine explains, the mandate for leadership is a 920-page document that details how the next Republican administration will implement radical and sweeping changes to the entirety of government. This blueprint assumes that the next president will be able to rule by fiat under the unitary executive theory, which posits that the president has the power to control the entire federal executive branch. It is also based on the premise that the next president will implement Schedule F, which allows the president to fire any federal employee who has policy-making authority and replace them with the presidential appointee who is not voted on in the Senate. The president would
not allowed. You have to be approved by the Senate before you can get appointed to your job.
Directly manage and influence Department of Justice and FBI cases, which would allow him to pursue criminal cases against political enemies. Environmental law would be gutted, and states would be prevented from enforcing their own environmental law.
Again, using the federal power to prevent states from implementing their own environmental policies to help combat climate change. I thought you guys are for states' rights. Oh, it's right. You're against it when progressives want to implement policies. No surprise.
They're against it when they're trying to stop Earth becoming a white version of Venus.
To this, and it's pretty complicated, so let me try to parse this out for you. What this basically means is that federal agencies which currently operate independently would lose that independence. Many federal agencies that they don't like would just be abolished or weaponized to their own liking. For example, they plan on gutting the EPA, predictably, and shifting them away from their focus on climate change entirely, while directing other agencies to expand fossil fuel infrastructure, like the Department of Energy, for example. And you're probably thinking, well,
push Earth towards looking like more and more towards looking like a white version of Venus.
Gee, I wonder what they would do if corporations said, we want to do capitalism, we want to go green the capitalist way. I wonder if they would try and ban that.
Yes, they would.
Wow, he's against capitalism. So another thing they claim to be for.
And fucking remember, these guys are fascists. They hate anything that doesn't agree with their fascist genocidal policies.
Couldn't the president already effectively do that by just appointing a stooge or industry plant? I mean, we've seen this again and again. So why not just make somebody who is a fossil fuel CEO, for example, the head of the EPA? Well, the president could do that, but this is different because it goes further than that. Because once they re-implement Schedule F via executive order, they also plan to clean house, which is very different than last time. Because as Salon explains, by replacing federal employees with like-minded officials, Trump-era conservatives are planning to remove federal employees whom they perceive as obstacles to the president's agenda early on. This would avoid the pitfalls of Trump's first years in office and eliminate the possibility of any resistance a Republican president would encounter, the AP reported. And what this would do is create a sort of organizational harmony, so you wouldn't see the pushback that we saw in Trump's first years in office, for example, because remember, he wanted to do a lot of really terrible things, but he couldn't. There are limits to the president's power, but this is kind of the answer to that. It's a way to address these obstacles that he encountered and remove them. And think about it this way. So remember when Bill Barr was Attorney General and he contradicted Trump's lies about the election, and he said that he's not going to open up a probe into the FBI's investigation of Trump's 2016 campaign. Like, he openly defied Trump, essentially. Well, Barr was able to do that because as the Attorney General, as the head of the Department of Justice, you have independence, you have autonomy, right? Trump can't influence what you do. He could simply fire you and replace you with somebody else who's more loyal. But even that power is limited because Trump tried to do this. Remember when Justice Department officials threatened to resign en masse when Trump considered replacing Jeffrey Rosen with Jeffrey Clark when he was trying to steal the election? I mean, that was really important. That stopped Trump from proceeding forward with his attempt to steal the 2020 election. But I mean, think about what would happen in that scenario if the president assumed direct control of the Department of Justice and worse, replaced every legacy employee with Trump loyalists who would be less likely to defy him. I mean, you start to kind of see
in the end, they still
how
can't
this
do
would become a
anything,
threat to
though.
democracy directly, and why this would be much worse
they
than
will.
last time.
They will. Oh, well, at least they'll try.
Because
And they will
those
fail
existing
immensely.
checks that limit the president's power would simply not exist anymore under this philosophy, which they want to embrace. It would give him virtually unlimited power over the entire executive branch and every agency, and that is a problem. And Trump had authoritarian ambitions before, right? But the problem is that he didn't have the power or the know-how to actually pull off his dictatorial ambitions. But this time would be different, because many of the 300 plus conservatives involved in Project 2025 came from Trump's administration, and they would likely return for round two.
The Hindu guy, the Hindu Nazi.
Careful, you'll probably be called racist for that one. But doesn't matter which Republican it is. They're both. Anyone was gonna probably do this stuff.
Two, if he were reelected. And what's scary is that Trump has already embraced this vision for the executive. So if he's reelected, this will likely become a reality. So what they're doing is they're looking back at the obstacles that he faced the first time he was in the White House, and they're trying to eliminate all of those obstacles going forward, so that way he can do all of the terrible things that he wants to do. But once they consolidate presidential power, they then move on to the second order of business, the implementation of policy. And a lot of that includes deregulation, giveaways to their donors that fund, this network, the traditional conservative things that you would expect. But there's also a component regarding conservative social policy, and it's a sort of wish list that would basically transform the United States into a Christian theocracy. And they're pretty explicit about this. So Dame explains, the social conservative wish list calls for ending abortion, diversity and inclusion efforts, protections for LGBTQ people, and most importantly, banning any and all LGBTQ content.
So here we go. Ban abortion everywhere, which, hey, states' rights. We don't want you to ban abortion in all of other states, so no, fuck off. Ban diversity, so not even trying to help minorities get into power whatsoever, anything like that.
Yep.
And of course,
I can tell you now, they'll consider. I can tell you now, they're going to consider interracial marriage to be diversity. So you can say goodbye to interracial and interfaith marriages.
And just like with Russia and China, wants to ban all LGBT content and take away their rights whatsoever. This is just Nazi-esque crap. And the fact that people would still vote for these people, you're just retarded if you vote for Republicans after you hear this. And you gotta also remember, you do realize you've lost very badly in the midterms when you got rid of Roe v. Wade, right? The vast majority of Americans are against you banning abortion everywhere. And then you're gonna do this too? Ban like LGBT people? Overwhelm Americans. Even the majority of Republicans don't even agree with this. You're gonna lose terribly. Like, if the Democrats were smart, which unfortunately they're not doing because they're bought off hacks, they would post this every single ad for the rest of the year into 2024, every single day onward that they're trying to do this stuff. And guess what? The Republicans would never be able to win ever again. Unless they become progressive.
In fact, the mandate for leadership makes eradicating LGBTQ people from public life its top priority.
Genocide.
Its number one promise is to restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children.
Restore the family as the centerpiece of American life. Unless, of course, you're LGBT, then fuck you. You're not family.
Or interracial, remember? They won't say it because of how unpopular it is. But as I said, they'd also come after interracial and interfaith marriages, thinking that they're satanic and dirty and part of the
They did say they're against diversity, so that is part of it.
Yep.
So
and
they're actually anti-family people.
Yep. As I said, the
they
diversity that would probably very quickly go. Oh yeah, by the way, diversity includes interracial and interfaith marriages. So we're going to ban them too.
This is white supremacy, Nazism, and Christian fundamentalism all in one. Absolutely unacceptable.
They plan to do so. As you'll see in the paragraph below, they plan to proceed by declaring any and all LGBTQ content to be pornographic in nature. And this is a direct quote from Project 2025's document. Quote, pornography manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexual...
LGBT is not pornographic, you fucking idiots. You're saying people... This is literally the arguments that I heard back in the 2000s on why gay people should not have rights and stuff like that. Silly
Of
then,
children,
silly now.
for instance, is
In the
not
old
a
days,
political
really
Gordian
old
knot
days, this was
inextricably
also,
binding a
arguments against interracial and interfaith marriages too.
claims about free speech, property
another thing
rights,
of-
sexual
they're used
liberation,
to
and
get rid of that. Get rid of that too.
child welfare. It has no claim to First Amendment protections. Its
does, so
purveyors
eat
are
shit.
child predators and misogyn.
Oh yeah, so we're child predators for being for gay rights, don't you know? And we hate women too for thinking trans shouldn't be able to compete in sports if they meet all the requirements. Oof.
Something I just read recently. So you know how all these transphobes are like, oh, why can't trans people just have their own league? Yeah, guess what? Those same transphobes got upset when rugby was like, when a group of rugby people in somewhere in Australia, I think, I can't remember exactly where,
So, once
said that said, sure, we'll allow trans people to
Make their own
have
league?
our own league for trans people.
And they still had a meltdown over it.
Yep. Yep.
Not surprised.
Yep.
Because reality,
Like I
guys,
said.
the reality is you just want LGBT people to die. You want them to have no enjoyment in life whatsoever. You want them to just die. And guess what? The world will be better off if you die instead. So how about that?
Misogynistic exploiters of
Oh
women.
my God.
Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug.
LGBT is addictive.
I think they've what's the term there? Thou doth protest too much?
That sounds like projection. Maybe
Yep.
people come out of the closet as soon as Crowder does.
And as psychologically destructive as any crime. Pornography should be outlawed.
Yeah, pornography should be banned. And guys, conservatives are not going to stop at pornography. They think everything is pornographic. They're going to use it to go after video games, anime, and all that. They're going to go up against anything. And that's why these people need to be stopped at all costs.
The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned.
People who produce and distribute porn should be in prison. Gee, how about, you guys like China a lot, apparently, because that's what they've done for 20 years. Saudi Arabia, too?
I'll give you a
Russia?
translation. Put in jail, aka put in concentration camps.
Educators and public librarians
gas
who purvey
chambers.
it.
We know that's what they really want. Because they're evil.
Third Reich? Oh, these guys love the Third Reich, apparently.
Should be classed as registered sex
Oh, they want to
offenders.
make a fourth Reich. So,
Educators and public librarians who promote LGBT rights should be registered as sex offenders. You guys are fucking retarded.
And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread
like I said,
should be
this is-
shuttered.
Ban telecommunication companies that are pro-LGBT as well.
That is absolutely chilling.
Wow.
But the question is, what would this look like in practice? And to be honest, nobody knows for sure. But at best, it looks like a nationwide implementation of Don't Say Gay in all schools.
And guess what? You're not going to do it
Christian
in us
Sharia.
liberal states. And if you try it, we will kill you. How about that?
Yep.
Because you do know liberals are armed to teeth as much as conservatives, right? And that's
Oh,
happened
yeah.
that's happened to a lot of LGBT rallies and stuff. LGBT
Yep.
individuals are armed to teeth. Oh, you don't like when you
Yep.
see them holding AR-15s on stuff, do you? Then back the fuck off and leave them alone. They're not child predators or anything like that. You're actually more likely to be the child predator, as we've seen throughout the years, especially the Catholic Church.
Yep.
So go fuck off with your projection, leave them alone, and if not, just die.
And a likely ban on gender affirming care in all 50 states. But at worst, this also could look like the literal imprisonment of anyone who is openly LGBTQ.
I mean, the funny thing is, you're more likely
they
to
don't-
instigate a second American Civil War by doing this, which is, funny enough, exactly what these people want. Of course, just like the first time around, you're gonna lose.
Dame speculates it's also arguable that LGBTQ parents would be subject to arrest, imprisonment, and being put on sex offender registries for exposing children to pornography simply by being LGBTQ and having children. It could be argued as well that people who are visibly trans in public are pornographic or
And yeah, here's the funny thing too is, it could be
statement of gender roles.
Yeah, this could go up against people who are not even trans. People are just cis and stuff like that. Oh, we think you're trans and all that, therefore you're gonna be prosecuting stuff like that. Which, by the way, we covered, I think, in the last episode, cis people getting harassed by transphobes and all that.
I remember a guy told a kid to take her clothes off and prove she wasn't trans in the middle of a fucking thing, and then had the gall to call other people pedophiles.
I think we covered it.
Seen because they might be seen by a minor.
Disgusting.
This understanding of intent is in line with the call to eradicate transgenderism from public life. So this is genuinely terrifying because we are looking at a situation where every single queer person and arguably queer allies would no longer be safe in this country. They could all be subject to imprisonment or being on a sex offender list just because they're gay or trans. I mean,
or even support it too.
Many people would be forced to leave, especially if they're in red states with governors not willing to protect them. This would create an LGBTQ refugee crisis of mass proportions. And that's what they want. But it gets worse because they want to crack down on the internet. Now, first, let's talk about the way that that would affect LGBTQ plus people and their allies. So with pornography being outlawed and all queer-related content being designated as porn, well, anyone who disseminates said pornographic material, like myself apparently, and the website that allows for said dissemination, like YouTube apparently, as well as the internet service provider that gives users access to this website that disseminates pornographic material, would all be subject to punishment or imprisonment at worst. In other words, if YouTube doesn't...
Gee, how much would that kill the economy for them being so Puritan and violent? Oh,
ask North Korea.
Yep, you're becoming North Korea.
They don't have an internet, remember? Yep. And their economy basically doesn't exist.
Make everyone's lives miserable because you can't accept people are different from you.
Their website of pornographic LGBTQ plus content, then internet service providers would be forced to cut them off, which would effectively kill off all of these websites unless they comply. And LGBTQ content isn't the only thing that they would designate as porn. Let's be clear about that. Think of all of the movies and video games that would be censored if this all came to fruition. I mean, we're looking at a censorship regime here that's far worse than China's and more similar to Saudi Arabia's and the Taliban's. That's where we're at. That's what they're openly saying that they want. But if they try to do this, there'd obviously be extreme pushback from blue states. But
yeah, they're gonna lose they're gonna lose very badly if they try this. They're not gonna be able to get away with this.
Of course, they've thought about that too, and they have a plan. Game continues, the organizations that drafted the mandate for leadership understand that blue states, which have sanctuary laws for transgender people, are unlikely to comply. It's difficult to imagine California arresting and prosecuting teachers, librarians, doctors, therapists, bookstores, virtual or physical, LGBTQ parents, and especially LGBTQ people merely for existing in public. This is why they include the following paragraph, quote, where warranted and proper under federal law, initiate legal action against local officials, including district attorneys who deny American citizens the equal protection of the laws by refusing to prosecute criminal offenses in their jurisdictions.
They're not criminals, so eat shit.
This holds true particularly for jurisdictions that refuse to enforce the law against criminals based on the left's favorite defining characteristics of the would-be offender, race, so-called gender identity, sexual orientation, etc., or other political considerations, e.g. immigration status. This is calling for the executive branch to use the Department of Justice to threaten prosecution of any local or state officials if they do not charge LGBTQ people and their allies with crimes under the pretense that they are breaking federal and state laws against exposing minors to pornography. If people at the Department of Justice refuse to go along with this, then they can simply be replaced under Schedule F. And we're really not even scratching the surface because remember, this document is 900 plus pages long. And we're just looking at the LGBTQ policies. But think about the ways that they'd hamstring states' ability to provide women with abortions. Think about how this will impact people on welfare, people getting Social Security, Medicare, employment. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and every possibility ranges from a threat to democracy from an outright violation of democracy. And the only check on the president in this scenario would be Congress and our far-right Supreme Court.
And remember, the Supreme Court didn't buy that judicial theory or whatever that thing was a couple months ago. That's why I said I don't think they're going to be able to get away with this. Because the Supreme Court, apparently, even they know that's too far. Just like when they wouldn't help Trump with his trying to steal the election.
Don't really like those odds, right?
And of course, you got to also remember too. Right now, Congress has Democratic Senate, so their Democrats are not ever going to support this right now at all. So they're not going to win in that regard either.
Even if Congress tried to rein in the president's power and pass some sort of a law.
Remember, they're anti-democratic fascist Nazis, so they'll try to find a way to
to stop this from happening.
Democrats.
Well, the Supreme Court could go along with it. They could embrace unitary executive theory and strike down that law on grounds that it's unconstitutional. And the president could continue to do this. It's a literal nightmare scenario. Like, imagine, do you think that Clarence Thomas or Samuel Alito would not go along with this? Of course they would. But
I think either every one of them but one or all of them did not support his the judicial theory one a few months ago, so that actually might be the case they wouldn't.
Having said that, though, before we get a little bit too down, this is only a wish list. Odds are they're not going to get 100% of the things that they ask for. But what if they get 50% or 25%? I mean, certainly if they tried this, there would be a massive legal battle with
the existence of same-sex people, the end of interracial and interfaith marriages, end of democracy,
ban porn, ban the internet, stop climate change, be against capitalism and states' rights when it goes against them, which once again shows how hypocritical the right is. They claim to be for states' rights and for capitalism, but when the left wants to do capitalism and states' rights their way, all of a sudden they want to ban it because you're a bunch of authoritarian cunts. And by the way, like I said earlier, all this stuff right here is so overwhelmingly popular that they will outright lose an election if the Democrats actually regularly talked about this. They would lose and never recover from this, hopefully.
Judges striking it down initially and it making its way to the Supreme Court, so there would be time for us to prepare how we're going to respond to this. But regardless, even if they got 10% of it and Trump just did what he says he's going to do, which is expand the power of the executive, that is still very troubling. Consolidating executive power is not a new phenomenon because each president has continued to expand power. Everyone, Democrats and Republicans alike, Obama, Bush, Trump. But we're talking about a massive expansion of presidential power that gives the president virtually unlimited authority over the entire.
Crapping on Obama and Biden now about how that they have too much power. Now they want to expand the power of the presidency, which they claim to be against.
Executive. But even if, in the best case scenario, they get nothing, none of this comes to fruition, and Trump doesn't even do what they say he should do with regard to taking control.
Which honestly, I still think Trump would not win in 2024. I still think Biden would win pretty comfortably right now, especially if Trump goes to prison. Which, by the way, if he did, he shouldn't be able to run in the first place.
Of the executive. Well, I still think this is worth our attention because this is the vision of 50 right-wing think tanks that have a lot of sway over Republican politicians.
Yep.
That's huge. They are telling us that this is what they want for our country, an end to U.S. democracy, a dictatorship with the Republican on top. And I think that they wrote Project 2025 with Trump in mind, but they'll take anyone. They'll take DeSantis, they'll take Nikki Haley, they will take anyone who is willing to do what they want to do. And if maybe they say we're going to endorse a candidate, give them lots of donations if they pledge to support Project 2025 in their first 180 days in office, well then, this could give a little bit more teeth to this authoritarian manifesto, right? But the fact that this is what they want as soon as a Republican comes back into the White House means that we have to fight that much harder to keep a Republican out of the White House for as long as we can, to at least buy us some time, right? So, you know a little bit about Project 2025. Do with this information what you will.
Honestly, just try to have it as dishonest as they can. Is if they've shown that they can lie and make things up to support their agenda, we might as well start doing the same fucking thing, except actually throw enough truth in there to make it impossible to distinguish.
So yeah, what do you have to say about all this?
I'm not surprised, and I also reckon that, and don't forget that once they're done with same-sex people, they'll be going after interracial and interfaith couples because they just want a Christian Sharia state.
So guys, yeah, This is what the whole thing was going to be. They were going to ban abortions everywhere, even states where they want it to be legal. Ban gay rights everywhere, even in places that want it. They want to ban porn, which would go after other things too that aren't pornographic. They want to censor the internet. They want to make the president even more powerful. They want to do all these things. And I'm sorry, this is fascist, it's Nazi, it's authoritarian, and it's evil. And if you support any of these things, you're evil. And if you want America to be better, there's no other option. You cannot ever, and I mean ever, vote for Republicans. It's an evil party that honestly is getting closer to should be considered a terrorist group that should be banned.
Yep.
They're evil.
Yep.
And if they try any of these things, they need to be shot on sight. They are evil, and they have to go.
I think at this point, considering the shit they're going at, we probably I think at this point, violence might be the only thing we might have to start resorting to violence.
And
stop some of
they're the ones that always resort to violence, remember?
Yep.
And here's another thing, too. The vast majority of Americans don't agree with any of these things. So, what you need to do if you're an honest person is, okay, we'll stop advocating for these and we'll become liberal, basically. That's what an honest person does. When you see the vast majority of Americans, even Republicans, are even against a lot of these things, you have to back down. Because you're going to lose very badly, as we saw in the midterms. You're going to lose again if you do this. And that's why I don't think they're going to be able to get away with this. They're either going to lose the election 2024, which right now I think Biden or any Democrat would win right now, or if they do get in and try to implement any of these things, they're going to lose so badly they're never going to be able to recover again. This is like political suicide forever. And a lot of the left needs to also realize this. I don't know why a lot of left can't realize that them doing this is going to lead to the Republican destruction of the party. They're going to die because no one likes them. They have to consider that. All right, so now, I guess on to the next topic.
Obey. Gamers raging over Starfield pronoun options. I love this.
Oh, this is so fun.
Much.
Oh yeah, and this, by the way, shows how silly the right is. And this is stuff they want to ban too. So anyways, a new game came out recently called Starfield, and conservatives have had a meltdown, of course. Gee, why am I not surprised they're always having a meltdown? And what's the meltdown this time? Because you have the option to use pronouns in the game. I kid you not. Once again, against free speech and capitalism. Gee, not surprised conservatives are against those things. And oh boy, this person had like the biggest meltdown I've ever seen. This is hilarious. Raging over video game designers wanting to do what they want. This is sad. So let's watch this and laugh.
You take everything we love, all our emotions, all our fantasies, all our escapism, and you just can't help shovel your dog f***ing crap ideology into
it's not being shoved. It's a choice, you idiot. This is literally the exact same thing Furry Retard cried about when Temtem came out, that pronouns were available in the game. And even said when he streamed it too. And this game's going to get 1 point less because of that. Guys, it's just an option. If you identify as a man, he, him right there. If you identify as female, she, her right there. If you identify as whatever, that's all it is. When I played Temtem, you know what I did? He, him, and done. It's that simple. It's not being forced on you. It's called a option for the player, which any video gamer should always support options for the players. Unlike video game developers. Hello, Game Freak, ban the national Dex and EXP share options.
Everything! Every single
at least if they were going to do that, at the least Game Freak could have done, is have the option of turning it on and off. Because I actually found when I played through Pokemon Yellow fairly recently, when I got the EXP all, I didn't use it I actually found myself using it between Erica and Sabrina, and then I just turned it off for the rest of the game.
I never use it because I'm always at the right levels pretty much every time until the Elite Four.
Well, I also didn't want to do too much wild Pokemon grinding, since wild Pokemon give trash experience in
but that's fun though for me.
Few generations. I know, but I don't like the grinding off tiny amount of tiny bits of experience. I actually want to get a reasonable amount to level up reasonably quickly. Like I'm thinking maybe 5 or 6 battles instead of 15.
Just like I always
But that's
change
just
my
my
team
thing.
every
That's
time
just-
around, and of course a lot of people apparently don't battle all the trainers, whereas I battle every trainer I can get my hands on.
Oh yeah,
The
That's
viral
fun.
rant
battle every trainer.
That's
I do too.
Because that's fun apparently, and people don't like that.
from anti-SJW YouTuber Heel vs. Babyface. And for those not plugged into the discourse on this one, let me fill you in. So there's a new Bethesda game called Starfield, and in the beginning of the game, you can create and customize the character that you're going to be playing as. This is a pretty common feature in most role-playing games. Now, this grown man had an absolute meltdown, all because the game gave him the option to choose his pronouns. Yeah, that's what led to that rant. So now that you have some additional context here, let's go ahead and watch the full thing.
I just want to say something to you, Bethesda. Just want to say a little.
Oh, pause quickly. There's a bit more to it for this one as well. There's also a couple other things as well. Apparently that they mistook one of the cyborgs who was cis female, explaining how a clone could be female. Hello, Bad Batch. And he started screaming about how she was trans and never was able to let it go. Yep. Then there was something else that happened on top of that, and something else, and then the pronouns thing just finished it off.
Oh my god. I mean, if you're gonna shit on Bethesda, just shit on for being a shitty company, not because of this.
Or something.
Yeah.
There is nothing I love more. Taking my headphones off, fuck that. Bethesda, there is nothing I love more than to sit down, comfy chair, turn on my PC, fire up a brand new RPG, lose myself, think, oh my god, just think of this world, just think of all the planets I can visit,
earlier,
all the immersive things that I can get involved with, all the fights, all the relationships, all the people I meet, all the places I go. I'm so excited to go there. And you know, I love nothing more than, with all of that laid out in front of me, I love nothing more than to be dragged out at every fucking conceivable opportunity so you can fucking current day us.
They're not doing that though?
Sorry, did you want to get immersed in our world? Yeah, well, guess what? Fucking pronouns! Fucking gender ambiguity!
Big deal!
Fucking
you pick your pronouns and you're done. It's that simple, you fucking whiny Karen.
Current day Californian shit! Because that's all
The majority of Americans are pro-gay and pro-trans rights, so it's not just a California thing.
we fucking know! Because we're boring! We're so fucking boring!
All this rage over nothing.
Yep.
We
Just
can't
shut the
see
fuck
past
up.
our own fucking reflection! That's the level of our narcissism here at Bethesda Western Game Company!
Narcissism, yeah, irony coming from
Fuck
you.
your immersion! Fuck you having a good time! Fuck you falling into a world and just getting lost! No, no, no! Current fucking day!
You have
Fuck
all
off.
that!
You're boring! You're fucking dull! You have nothing to say!
Then don't play their games then if you think they suck! It's not that hard! Vote with your wallet!
You are a one-hived mind twat waffle!
No.
That's all you fucking are!
I guess you're British, because that insult doesn't affect us Americans.
And you wonder why people are getting so fucking sick and tired! You take everything we love, all our immersions, all our fantasies, all our escapism, and you just can't help shovel your dog shit, fucking crap ideology into every single solitary fucking thing!
Having a normal one, I see. He chose to
Thing!
having a normal one, I see. Now, he seemingly chose to keep playing after the pronoun controversy, and he ended up encountering a trans NPC, which stands for non-playable character in the wild, and his reaction to that was...
Guess what? That character's not even trans. Actually, is cis female.
It's a good thing I don't really care.
It's predictably hilarious.
I have no interest in playing this game. But it's hilarious that you're raging over nothing.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Oh god. I've just lost complete sound. Oh, hello?
It's infected everywhere.
Nerves kicking in.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
I double checked, and therapy is free on Turf Island, right? So I would highly encourage this individual to take advantage of his country's universal healthcare system. We don't have that luxury in the United States, so he should unironically get some help. And I mean that earnestly.
NHS, that's literally all that's good about you.
Therapy if you are this
and I want that over here too.
By a trans person.
Turf Island.
Probably worse. I want to be worships J.K. Rowling.
Because it's not.
Oh, don't. Oh, remember that
I'm
JQ, and yes, I'm calling her JQ Rowling for a reason, because she is associated herself with multiple, and I'm not kidding when I say this. I'm deadly serious. Nazi TERFs.
But to be fair, gaming is not immune to controversies over cultural issues. Nearly 15 years ago, Rockstar released Grand Theft Auto: The Ballad of Gay Tony, and I personally remember the discourse at this time. In a 2009 post in the GTA forums, this user pointed out that the blatant homophobia was one of the first things that they noticed in response to the game's announcement, saying that it was sad people were willing to reject the game all because it had gay in the title and featured a gay character. Now in 2012, BioWare didn't just give players the option to be gay or lesbian in Mass Effect 3. They actually included a gay sex scene, which was very controversial at the time. I know,
I'm
because
actually
I
surprised
remember.
they would be able to get away with that, because usually, America, they don't like sex in video games, pretty much. Right, more power
and this
to
came
them.
after they actually removed a gay sex scene from Mass Effect 2 following criticism from Fox News. But the controversy goes both ways, because earlier this year when Hogwarts Legacy came out, there was a lot of discourse about whether or not it was ethical to play that.
Remember that? People had a meltdown when Hogwarts Legacy came out, because if you didn't like the game at all, you support J.K. Rowling and such.
Yes, I remember that.
I was almost tempted to do a video on it, but just talk about it, but it just never happened. We had to say about that thing that happened months ago.
I'm like, I mean, if you, okay, it's one thing to be like, I will not buy the game because some of the portion of the money is going to J.K. Rowling and she's going to use it to murder trans people. Oh, that's fine. Harassing gamers though, and trying to get their Twitch streams taking down their Twitch streams because they're streaming.
Which, by the way,
Hogwarts Legacy.
Which, by the way, that happened too. Remember, that happened to a lot of people. I remember that.
Yep.
That game because
for me personally, I didn't do it. I didn't buy it because I hate J.K. Rowling. I didn't buy it because I just wasn't interested in the game. It didn't appeal to me.
I guess you're just not into Harry Potter like me either.
I am. It's just not really much in the way of playing games, and everything else is secondary to Star Wars. Still, I still haven't played very far into my Scarlet game, so I've got to charge up my stuff and get back into that eventually.
Purchase that game. Are you supporting a transphobic bigot like J.K. Rowling? Now, the Ant-Man decided to see what this guy said about that controversy and juxtapose what he said then with what he's saying now about Starfield, and as you're going to see, there's some hypocrisy there.
I will not be berated, bullied, intimidated into not playing a game because you think it attacks you or goes against your ideology. Boo fucking who? Man up! Fucking pronouns! Boo fucking who? Man up! Fucking gender ambiguity!
I, for one, am shocked that he'd be completely inconsistent here. But to be fair, he isn't the only snowflake to melt down over pronouns in Starfield, because Rumble content creator Nina Infinity tweeted about how she nearly refunded the game when it asked for her pronouns, and she was still considering it given how annoyed she was that they dared to ask. And on top of that, the Quartering chimed in to defend his fellow anti-SJW comrades, saying the left always tries to gaslight people into thinking they are overreacting.
One of the worst of the anti-SJWs. He is... you know, I'm going to say it. He's the intellectual successor to No Bullshit.
Oh, Jeremy, me compared to no bullshit.
It isn't
All that
just
hurts.
the pronouns, it's the slippery slope it represents. Cultists screaming it's no big deal also think it's no big deal. Healthy young women mutilate their bodies for affirmation. Ah, another transphobe supposedly concerned about mutilation. I wonder if he's ever questioned the ethics around circumcision or the literal genital mutilation of intersex babies. Something tells me that he only talks about trans people and specifically wants to police their bodily autonomy.
But circumcision, that's A-okay.
But to be fair, when he says that this represents a slippery slope, he's right. Representation leads to normalization, and that's a good thing. Trans people exist, and they also play video games. So why shouldn't they have the...
And that's why they add that option in the video games, you fucking idiot! Because they're trans people that want to play games and all that. It's not a big deal. I mean, and also, too, these are role-playing games. They're all, like, fictional characters. I could go on a game and make, like, a completely fictional character that has nothing to do with me whatsoever, and I can make them trans or whatever. It's not a big fucking deal. So stop being a
the
Karen.
option to create a character that they want. I mean, in a lot of video games,
being Karens. It's who we are.
you can create any character.
And
When my
that's why
husband
you
was
deserve to
playing
be
Baldur's
laughed
Gate
at.
3, he played as some green fucking alien thing. Why can't
And
we
be
be
told,
what we
"Hey,
want
Karen."
in a game that is about role-playing and simulation and realism? Why not give them this option? Well, it's purely because of bigotry. Now, Heels versus Babyface actually responded to the virality of that rant, and he basically talked about his quote-unquote cancellation, which you're not being canceled, but he claims that actually
you're just being made
he's not
fun of
mad.
because you're an idiot.
You're all
and a
mad.
trans.
Man has opinion about video game. Internet goes absolutely nuclear crazy about opinion on video game. Is this actually about opinion on video game? No, this has nothing to do with opinion on video game. This has everything to do with going after the far left sacred cow of gender ideology.
My brother in Christ, nobody is mad or going nuclear crazy over
We're
your
just
video game
making fun of
opinion
you.
or response to fucking gender ideology. We're laughing at you because you acted like a fucking petulant child. I mean, imagine if the shoe were on the other foot and a gay gamer freaked out at the sight of heterosexuality being depicted. Wouldn't you laugh at them and think that that's a little bit ridiculous?
And they are
find
silly
that funny
too.
because straight people exist. Therefore, I think it's perfectly fine if they are depicted in video games. But I mean, to protect his bruised ego, he decided to pretend like he's speaking some sort of a forbidden truth, when in reality, he's just a reactionary snowflake who got triggered and melted down, and he can't accept that everyone on the internet is laughing at him. So he's got to make it about, oh, well, this is about gender ideology, and I guess I hit a nerve. No, brother, we're just laughing at you. That's it. It's not that complicated. You don't have to overthink it. But another big streamer went viral as well for the same reason. Dr. Disrespect actually speculated that Bethesda didn't send him a copy of the game because of his recent transphobic comments. And he came to this conclusion
Disrespect?
after
Transphobe?
investigating and finding out that Bethesda's senior VP of Public Relations, Pete Hines, actually has, wait for it, pronouns in the bio.
I got it. So, I gotta say this, Chance, just real quick. I just gotta get it off my chest. Obviously, we've been hyping up Star Citizen for Starfield for a long time. We've been making it very vocal, right, Champs? We had our team reach out. Hey, can we work with you? Can we do something? Due to past controversies, there's no way we can work with Dr. Disrespect.
I would really like to know about this transphobia that's been accused of you of disrespect. That's very on base if that's true.
How about just give me, like, let me play the game when some of the others are playing it. How about that? Yeah, that's still the case.
Yeah, that sounds like coke to me. But he responded to that video going viral, claiming that he was taken out of context, and added, politics should stay out of the video game industry entirely, along with people like this.
It's not
Now, that's such a
political.
stupid point to make, because everything is inherently political. You can't detach politics from anything.
remember?
I mean, art imitates life, and life is inherently political. If you don't care about politics, it still affects you. But to the extent that something should not be political, it's the mere inclusion of trans people. Why do you view their inclusion as a political point? They exist. They're not political points or political pawns. They exist in reality, right? They're your friends, your family. They work at grocery stores.
And guess what else too? Regardless of the reason, if developers want to add pronouns into games, guess what? It's called free expression, artwork, and capitalism, which supposedly you guys claim you're for. But of course, once again, you're against it when you don't agree with it.
Fast food restaurants. Perhaps you run into them and don't even realize it. Why do you think that they...
And also, if you're so against it, why are you buying the game? You know you're supporting the trans agenda by your own logic if you buy the game, yet you're still doing it. So it doesn't seem you really seem to care that much.
And being included is inherently political. Is it political to include black people or Asian people or gay people?
Yes.
I mean, it's just
I
they're
wonder how much
so
long before Tim Fool
petulant
cries about
and
this
so entitled that they think that the world revolves around them, and anything that deviates from the
48
norm,
hours, he
well,
probably
that's just
will.
inherently political.
And he'll say that's
I mean,
somehow
is it
gonna lead to a
political that
second
when
American
you go
Civil War,
to these
he
character
goes so badly?
creation screens, it always defaults to a white guy?
Because how everything's a civil war.
And of course, how remember, just like how Trump was supposed to win every single state last time.
Yep, I remember that because he's a fucktard.
And Tim Fool, I would like to see how you think my state, which hates Trump by like 30 points, would vote for him. That's hilarious.
I mean, a black person can claim that that's political. Women can claim that that's political. But you don't see them bitching, right? But Keffels pointed out his hypocrisy in response, writing, "You literally became popular by streaming a game that the US Army uses as a recruitment tool. Grow the fuck up, dude." And Hutch chimed in saying, "If pronouns are political, I've got some bad news for you." And he pointed out that doctor is sometimes used as a pronoun. Yeah. And what these transphobic dipshits fail to realize is that cis people also have pronouns. It's not just trans people that have pronouns. Cis people have them too, and we've been using them our entire lives. See, when they say things like, "I refuse to use pronouns," they're not actually smart enough to realize that they're using a pronoun to make that statement. But here's the thing. Reactionary gamers, they will continue to bitch and moan about the inclusion of trans people in video games in the same way that they've continued to bitch and moan about the inclusion of gay people in video games. And even though homosexuality in video games is still controversial, reactionaries don't cry about it as much because they've come to begrudgingly accept.
I've actually seen some of those anti-integration, anti-interracial marriage pamphlets that I saw some of them on the internet fairly recently. And they were using the same arguments that they're currently using against LGBT people. So yeah, they're gonna, as soon as they're done with LGBT people, they're gonna switch over to black people and law against racial and interfaith marriages.
That society has moved on without them, and them crying is not going to get developers to remove gay characters from video games, and the same will be.
The only way you're gonna get the LGBT agenda out of video games if you successfully boycott because of that. But you're not. You actively are supporting them by buying the game.
True for trans inclusion as well eventually. But that doesn't mean that Bethesda is trying to shove some sort of an agenda down your throat. That's stupid to think something like that, right? These companies don't actually have agendas. More options simply broaden the appeal and enhance realism. But at the end of the day, simple descriptive representation isn't going to make or break these games, right? Nobody's buying the game for that. The game is going to be bought if it's good, right? So if Starfield is good, even the most reactionary player isn't going to want to miss out on that experience. Unfortunately for this game, it seems as if the reviews are relatively mixed. I mean, they're positive, but I've heard mixed things.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's on Steam. I wouldn't be surprised if I go on there and probably a whole bunch of negative reviews are going to be about the pronoun thing. I would not be surprised if that's the case.
But I mean, when it comes to Bethesda, their inclusion of pronouns doesn't erase their horrific mistreatment of their own employees, specifically one of their trans employees. Because as the Mary Sue reports, Farron, a transgender woman, is suing ZeniMax, which is Bethesda's parent company, by the way, for their failure to provide continuation coverage for her healthcare. In the suit, Farron asserts that she signed a severance agreement with ZeniMax, which stipulated that they provide her COBRA coverage 18 months of healthcare coverage after leaving the job, on the condition that she not file a discrimination lawsuit. This was allegedly after a year of transphobic aggression in her workplace after she came out, which the company seems to admit if they've asked her to not file a discrimination suit. Oh, and she says she was pressured to come out because her supervisor outed her on Slack during a meeting before she could talk to the team herself. Farron documented all of this through screenshots, recorded phone calls, and more. And long story short, after agreeing to not sue them for discrimination so long as they continue to give her healthcare, they didn't hold up their end of the bargain, and they left her with thousands and thousands of dollars in medical bills. So they didn't uphold their end of the bargain, hence why she's suing. Now, I'll link you to her 4-hour-long video.
Well, right now I'm looking on Steam and it has very positive reviews, which means it's like it's 80% score, which is pretty good, although kind of low if it's a AAA game. So Steam doesn't seem to be mixed unless it's referring to somewhere else.
Where she goes over how the company fucked her over in painstaking detail. There's also a link to a Stephanie Sterling video that I will include that goes over it in a more concise manner. But I mean, this is the reality right here of large multinational corporations. The same woke corporations supposedly shoving an agenda down your throats are the same companies who allegedly mistreat and abuse their trans employees.
Yep,
so if these reactionaries feel victimized by Bethesda's mere inclusion of pronouns, imagine how it feels to be Farron. I mean, this fuckface couldn't walk a day in the shoes of any trans person if pronouns trigger him that much, right? Yep. But this is what entitlement leads to, right?
And as I mentioned, how many times have I mentioned this throughout the series? Corporations don't care about political stuff. All they care about is making money. That's why they do the LGBT agenda, as you call it, because it makes them more money to be pro-gay rights. I'm telling you, if they can make one more penny being anti-gay rights, they're going to do it because, hello, I like money, and they're going to want to get that penny. That's how it is. But right now, they make more money being pro-gay rights, so they're going to do it like that.
It makes you think that you are the center of the world, you're the main character, and anything that deviates from the norm or what makes you feel uncomfortable is automatically illegitimate. But this highlights the reality of late-stage capitalism. Well,
I looked up Starfield reviews, and according to this, I'm still trying to figure out what site this is. It's just Google, and the score is a 3.3 out of 5. It has a whole bunch of 5 stars, but a shit ton of also 1 stars. Can't wait to find those.
That'll be on the pronouns of the trans clone.
Let's see if I can find a 1-star review.
Are no woke corporations, contrary to popular belief. These corporations don't actually have any agenda, right? And to the extent that they do care about politics, it's about making sure that their taxes are cut and they can treat workers as shitty as possible and break up their unions. That's basically their entire political belief system. That's all they care about. Their one goal is to maximize profits, not push social justice causes or increase representation for some political cause, right? That's all they care about. It's just money, period. Don't overthink it. That's their one drive, making as much money as possible. So even if these reactionaries refuse to see it, they have more in common with trans people than they think. But rich capitalists have convinced them that trans people are the real enemies and not the rich people who are exploiting them. And there's a reason for that. They're just too dumb to see it.
So yeah, what do you guys say about conservatives once again being Karens, to my no surprise?
I'm not surprised.
Can you guys ever just stop crying about nothing? Is it really that hard to just leave stuff alone?
Apparently.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently it is.
I mean, if you're gonna have this much of a meltdown, can your brain just explode already so we don't have to deal with you all anymore, please?
Please, yes.
If you're gonna go after Bethesda, go after them for being a piece of shit company that makes shitty games, not because of pronouns. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, pronouns and trans clones. God, could you imagine? I imagine a lot of these same people are super mad at Disney because there's a chance that the main character of the Bad Batch might be trans or intersex.
Alright, so now...
That being Omega.
What's the next topic?
Give me a moment. I need to tell you. It'll be states trying to disqualify Trump.
Yeah, as he should be disqualifying peoples. So let's watch Kyle's video on that.
Alright, everybody, welcome to the show.
And of course, Kyle, like I said before, stop doing these intros.
On the serious
Stop, it's annoying.
And then later on...
Oh, stop a minute in, he won't stop.
With
2 minutes. One of these got out to 2 minutes.
Yeah, we did one that was 2 minutes recently.
At the moment, we still don't really know exactly what happened, so I'll present that to you.
Oh my god, he's still going a minute and a half in!
Stop!
Stop!
So we got all that and much, much more.
He's still going.
We're trying to continue growing that subscriber base.
Now he's crying about
they're gaining about 20,000
breaking
subs a month,
20,000 more subscribers in him. Oh my god, he won't shove about that either.
Now or something like that.
He's still going 2 minutes
bell icon
in.
so you get a notification every single time a video.
Like 2
If you'd like
minutes,
to
20 seconds before
Stop,
going.
All right, without further ado,
2.5 minutes in.
So ABC News
Gosh,
has this really
just
interesting
stop.
article that I wanted to share with you.
Kyle,
State
just
election
make
officials
this its
prepare for
own
efforts to
segment.
disqualify Trump under the
Seriously.
14th
Then you can
Amendment.
bitch about
And
it
then
for
they
like
say
5
New
minutes.
Hampshire, Michigan, and Arizona are bracing for lawsuits. So right now we have at least 3 different states where lawsuits are going to be brought, effectively saying this guy is disqualified from running for office.
Yep, the
because he
14th
tried
Amendment.
to do an insurrection or do a rebellion, coup, whatever you want to refer to it as. So they say efforts to keep former President Donald Trump off the 2024 ballot under the 14th Amendment are gaining momentum as election officials in key states are preparing for or starting to respond to legal challenges to Trump's candidacy. The argument to disqualify Trump from appearing on primary or general election ballots in 2024 boils down to Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment, which states that an elected official is not eligible to assume office if that person, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or had, quote, given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, unless they are granted amnesty by 2/3 vote of Congress. The argument that's being made here is that actually the default is that we're going to say he's guilty, and the only way he'd be able to run is if 2/3 of Congress votes to allow him to run, to like overrule this. It's up in the air legally. It might be on sketchy grounds. And again, the thing I keep coming back to is, don't you need a conviction over insurrection before you can effectively disqualify him? We all know he spearheaded January 6th, and he was in charge, and, you know, he had his little minions do the dirty work, but he was definitely the head of the snake. We all know that, but if you don't get him legally on insurrection, which he's not even charged with, by the way, he's got 91 charges against him, none of them are insurrection. I think he's guilty of the 91 charges, but none of them are insurrection. So how will this break down? Will they say, since you didn't get him on insurrection, he's allowed to run, or, you know, is there some precedent for taking people down without the conviction of insurrection? More on that in a minute, because there's some interesting facts about this. If you're thinking, oh my god, this is a novel legal theory, this has never happened before, that's actually not true. It's not true, so hold for that. Several advocacy groups have said that Trump's actions on January 6, 2021 fit that criteria, that he directly engaged in an insurrection. Yep. The legal theory that has been pursued unsuccessfully against a few other elected Republicans, arguing their actions around January 6th and support for overturning the 2020 election results amounted to the disqualifying behavior. Trump has denied any involvement in the attack on the Capitol. Quote, Joe Biden, Democrats, I think this is Trump's voice, I gotta do Trump's voice for you. Joe Biden, Democrats, and never-Trumpers are scared to death because they see polls showing President Trump winning in the general election. Trump campaign spokesperson Stephen oh my god, I did the Trump voice and it wasn't even Trump. I'm wasting all of my good Trump impressions. The people who are pursuing this absurd conspiracy theory and political attack on President Trump are stretching the law beyond recognition, much like the political prosecutors in New York, Georgia, and D.C. There's no legal basis for this effort. I'll leave that up to you guys to determine if you think there is a legal basis. The push to disqualify Trump under this constitutional clause gained more traction when 2 members of the Conservative Federalist Society, William Baud and Michael Stokes Paulson, recently supported the idea in the pages of the Pennsylvania Law Review following the Baud and Paulson
mentioned the last episode or something about
Conservative
this.
Federal Appeals Judge J. Michael Luddig and Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe made the same argument in the Atlantic. So in other words, the point that they're making is you have liberal legal experts as well as very conservative legal experts who are saying, no, I think this is legit. I think this is legit.
It is legit.
He should be disqualified from running. Now remember, Trump used the Federalist Society to handpick his judges, the ones that he put on the court. Virtually every conservative judge.
Gee, I bet Trump's all shocked Pikachu face here and there.
This is the Federalist Society, or certain members of the Federalist Society coming out and saying, I don't think Trump can be president. I don't think Trump can be president. Look, it's already the case. I think the Supreme Court is going to hear something on this. So, what do I think is going to go down? Look, to be honest with you guys, again, I do think what's most likely is without some sort of a conviction over insurrection, this isn't going to stand. That's my guess. But having said that, I do want to share this with you. There is, some case law history. So on this issue, somebody says, it's not a novel legal theory. 6 officials were barred under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment a century and a half ago.
Sounds like something in the Civil War.
In
Yeah.
And a participant in Trump's insurrection was disqualified from office last year. I remembered that. It was like, I'm trying to remember.
I don't
which
remember
state it was
that.
in, but there was some elected official.
Oh.
I think it was actually even in front of a conservative judge. And the conservative judge said, no, you're barred from holding even some sort of state office because you were at January 6th. And
I would like to hear about this, because I don't think I've heard about
legal
that.
standing still
What?
stands to this day.
It's unfortunately cutting out for me again, so what?
So it's not like it's a totally novel legal theory. It's not like there's no case law or precedent. There is. It's just a much higher profile example. And again, like I said, it's going to depend on which direction the courts go. You know, me personally, I would love to see more detailed legal arguments on both sides of this to really form, an opinion fully. I wouldn't reject it out of hand. It doesn't seem insane to me that he could be potentially disqualified, at least from the ballot in some states. But I won't hold my breath for it, particularly because my gut says, hey, if you don't have some sort of a conviction for an insurrection crime, then can they really make the argument and have it stick and have it stand? I don't know. And again, he's charged with 91 crimes. None of them are actual insurrection. So if he's not being charged with insurrection and there's no conviction over insurrection or something related to insurrection, I sort of hope the legal theory sticks, but at the same time, I'm a little skeptical that it will, even though I don't think it's a crazy legal theory at all. Now the ball is truly rolling, man. Like I said, you have 3 states, New Hampshire, Michigan, and Arizona, that are bracing for lawsuits on this exact issue, and you have the Supreme Court, to one extent or another, is going to hear stuff related to this issue. So the conversation is real, it's happening, and we'll have to wait and see.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor.
So yeah, what do you guys say about that?
I find it interesting so far.
A few states.
You gotta stop him somehow, because he's gonna literally end democracy if we don't.
I mean, if anything, he's his own enemy. Remember?
That is true. That is very true. He is his own worst enemy.
That's why we keep telling him to shut up all the time. But hey, you know what? Keep talking, Trump. Please keep going. Make a fool of yourself. Make it more likely you're gonna lose and not be able to run. And we would be so happy and laugh at you too because you're so stupid. All right.
Yep.
So yeah. This is something that needs to be done, because he should be disqualified for January 6th and trying to undermine the election. Take the L, you fascist orangutan. Alright, so now, on to the next topic.
Next up is Pope criticizes American conservatives.
This is actually interesting, as Pope Francis is actually a very, very, very strange pope in the 10 years he's been the pope. He says, like, a lot of somewhat, like, more, like, liberal things over, like, the 10 years. Like, do you remember when he said that atheists are able to go to heaven? Do you remember that one?
Yes, I remember. Yes, I do.
Which, now, we're atheists, so we don't buy your BS, but hey, I guess that's a lot nicer than saying we're gonna go to hell like we always used to do.
Yep.
And I think he was, like, more okay with, like, gay rights to a small extent. Like, he isn't, like, full-blown gay rights. I think he said, like, anti-gay stuff before, but he's not, like, a hardcore, like, anti-gay rights pope like previous ones I had. Like, I think he even criticized, I think he even got into it, too, in his video, where he kind of criticized conservatives in America for being, like, hardcore against abortion, which would be stunning if it came from him saying that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe it is. We'll see in a moment, because he is a very strange pope, that's for sure. Very strange.
Here we go, y'all. Pope Francis decided to throw some haymakers at conservatives in the U.S., I think specifically conservative Catholics. This is an article in the AP. They say, Pope says some backward conservatives in U.S. Catholic Church have replaced faith with ideology. Now, I understand what he's trying to say, that, like, now their political ideology is their faith, but I will also be a little pedantic here and point out that religious faith is also an ideology, okay? Like, it's not like religious faith is good, but political ideology is bad. No, they could both either be good or bad, and they are both definitely ideologies. Pope Francis has blasted the, quote, backwardness of some conservatives in the U.S. Catholic Church, saying they have replaced faith with ideology, and that a correct understanding of Catholic doctrine allows for change over time. Francis's comments were an acknowledgement of the divisions in the U.S. Catholic Church, which has been split between progressives and conservatives who long found support in the doctrinaire papacies of St. John Paul II and Benedict the whatever 16th, particularly on issues of abortion and same-sex marriage.
Yeah, because
Many
they were
conservatives
conservative.
have blasted Francis's emphasis instead on social justice issues such as the environment and the poor, while also branding as heretical his opening to letting divorced and civilly remarried Catholics receive the sacraments. Okay, so let's pause here for a second. The old school doctrine of Catholics in the U.S. and Christians more broadly is we're anti-abortion and we're anti-gay marriage. Now, beyond that, if you are a Catholic and you are divorced, first of all, they don't want you to get divorced. Second of all, if you do get divorced, you're no longer allowed to receive the sacraments, which is that goofy ceremony at the end of church where they act like you're eating the body of Christ and drinking the blood. It's like a little wafer thing. That was like a cornerstone of Catholic Church. Now, it's interesting because the Catholic Church has always been split, not always, but like in modern times, they've been split relatively 50-50. Like 50% of Catholics in the U.S. are Republican, 50% are Democrats. It's actually one of the more split denominations among white religious people in the United States. And of course, Pope Francis, since he got to power, he has much more focused on hey, we need to protect the environment and we need to look out for poor people. So in other words, this is just like a different portion of the ideology of Jesus. And, there's even an argument that the Bible is not, quote-unquote, pro-life as in anti-abortion. Abortion is performed in the Bible, where there's a passage where they say...
We covered it several years ago. The Bible's actually pro-abortion.
It, advocates...
The Bible's pro-abortion if you believe
abortion if your wife cheats on you. Anyway, I digress. So he's
Mm-hmm.
focusing on better parts of Christian message, like, hey, protect the environment and look out for the poor. But the conservative Catholics in the U.S. are pissing him for it. Like, I don't understand. Why don't you just shit on abortion all day long and shit on gay people all day long? And he's been more open to gay people than previous popes certainly have been. And so it's causing a split in the church. Now, by the way, it's hilarious because also part of Catholic doctrine is the Pope is like a representative of God. He's the closest...
Yeah, so all you Catholics have to respect the Pope and what he says. And if you don't, you're going against God, which, hey, if you're so God-fearing, which I'm not, you don't do that. Just saying.
Person to God.
That's your argument, not mine.
It's supposed to be special and sacred and holy. And all of a sudden, when his politics disagree with conservative Catholics, they're like, actually, no, you're not part of God. No, you're not in that position.
Don't do it when they're hypocritical.
A doctrinaire Catholic where you go by the letter of the law here. If you are, you're supposed to say, hey, I subject myself to the Pope because the Pope is right.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, like he says, they're putting ideology above faith, or in this particular instance, political ideology above faith. Francis made the comments in a private meeting with Portuguese members of his Jesuit religious order while visiting Lisbon on August 5th. The Jesuit journal La Civiltà Católica, which is vetted by the Vatican Secretariat of State. It'd be awesome if that was a horse. Vatican Horse of State. Published a transcript of the encounter Monday. During the meeting, a Portuguese Jesuit told Francis that he had suffered during a recent sabbatical year in the United States because he came across many Catholics, including some U.S. bishops, who criticized Francis's 10-year papacy as well as today's Jesuits. By the way, the Jesuits are a very liberal, very left-wing version of Christians. The 86-year-old Argentine acknowledged his point, saying there was a very strong, organized, reactionary attitude in the U.S. church, which he called backward. He warned that such an attitude leads to a climate of closure, which was erroneous. Quote, doing this, you lose the true tradition and you turn to ideologies to have support. In other words, ideologies replace faith, he said. The vision of the doctrine of the church as a monolith is wrong, he added. When you go backward, you make something closed off, disconnected from the roots of the church, which then has devastating effects on morality. I want to remind these people that backwardness is useless, and they must understand that there's a correct evolution in the understanding of questions of faith and morals that allows for doctrine to progress and consolidate over time. Francis has previously acknowledged the criticism directed at him from some U.S. conservatives, once quipping that it was an honor to be attacked by Americans. So in other words, what he's saying is, hey dog, look, I'm trying to be a good person, I'm trying to do the right thing, I'm trying to get other people to be good people and look out for the poor and look out for the needy and do the right thing. And I got all these conservative idiots who are telling me, why are you focusing on that? You should yell at women on the issue of abortion, and you should yell at gay people for being gay. And he's like, no, we're supposed to kind of evolve with the times. That's the argument he's making.
And I'm going to say this too, because there's polls been done about this. I even mentioned this too when it comes to millennials. There was a poll we covered in the show years ago that the reason why there are so many atheists among millennials and Gen Z and stuff is the 50% was because of the gay issue. We're for gay rights, and by and large, religious people, especially when I grew up, were against it. and they were incredibly hostile to it. Now, of course, thankfully, a lot of that's changed now. The majority of Americans are for gay rights. I think most Christian sects in America are actually for gay rights, except for, I think it was the Southern Baptists. Other than that, all the Christian sects in America are for gay rights in some regards. So it's changed in all that regards. But yeah, if you basically, you far-right Christian fundamentalists scare people away from being Christians and all that. You make more atheists because you're so far-right in that regard. If you want people... Ideally, we want religion to be gone from the world because we think it's dangerous and needs to go. But the next best thing is liberalize it. All religious people are liberal and mind their business, like be secular, like which America is supposed to be, remember, separation of church and state, which you don't like. So, yeah, if you want to keep your religion going, you have to adapt with the time. So if you want people to follow your faith, you have to placate to them. Hey, if we're pro-choice, you gotta be pro-choice. If we're for gay rights, you gotta be gay rights, and so on. Like, if you're so against that, you're gonna scare people away. Sorry, not my problem.
I mean, look, I respect it in the sense that he's trying to drag the Catholic Church into modernity. But also at the same time, I would argue, you don't need that doctrine at all to be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
You
That's
could
what
just
we
be
say.
a good person. And in fact, if you use human sympathy and empathy and reason and logic, you can come to a much better moral foundation than if you're trying to go based off of ancient texts or some new interpretation of ancient texts or some cult group. So, look, I credit to him. He's trying to be good. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to say, look, these people are forces of darkness. He's right about all that. But it's just hard to win that argument from within the belly of the beast in the sense that they're always going to have their doctrines they could point to and, their reasoning for being shitty people and using their religion.
But likewise,
effectively,
liberal Christians could find liberal sects in the Bible that they can promote.
And it's like you're
just like how leading up to the Civil War, the North and the South, the Christians in the North and South used different parts of the Bible to say, hey, slavery is right or slavery is wrong.
A veneer of seriousness over what your beliefs are and how you act in the world by alluding to, oh, I'm just doing God's will. You know what I mean? So at least he's trying to do it for good, but, ultimately, I don't think you need the religion. I don't think I need the religion. I think
you don't.
We can.
But if it makes,
focus
but
on
if
what's
it
true
somehow gets people for the stupid reason to become liberal or whatever, then I guess in the end, people become more liberal is most important.
He's certainly the best pope of my lifetime. Let's just hope that whichever one eventually replaces him is not going to turn that dial all the way back immediately.
Hey, y'all.
Yeah, because he is up there in age. I think he's almost 90, if not 90 already.
Yeah.
He's old.
Yeah.
I mean, old. So yeah, what do you have to say about that? Very interesting.
Good on him, yeah.
Like I said, Francis is the strangest pope I think I've ever seen. And I just looked up, he's 86, so he's younger than I thought he was. But that's pretty up there in age.
Not that much, yeah.
Yep, that's a problem too with being the Pope. Like, it's almost always old people, remember.
Yep, you have to be old to be a Pope.
At least he's not as backwards as other ones. So, I guess, hopefully he just stays alive longer to hopefully liberalize the papal states. It would be called Vicky 2 and EU4 and all that. Okay, yep. So, good work, I guess, even though we still think you're silly and all that. But hey, if you're still doing a good thing...
He's not as silly as the others.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, on to the next topic.
That'll be... Biden destroys Republicans on abortion.
Gee, such a simple thing for Dementia Joe to do? Let's see what this is about.
Democrats' best friend. Okay, he's not as bad when it comes to walking corpses as Dianne Feinstein and Moscow Mitch.
Mm-hmm.
Who look like they've literally died.
The Republicans. The Republicans are, they are like hell-bent on making it so that normie Americans all over this country want nothing to do with them, ever.
Thank
Biden
you for
does not
losing
have a high
for
approval
us.
rating. Biden has not been doing based shit much recently. There was a time where I think he went on a good streak and got some good legislation passed, but recently...
And Biden, remember your polls went up too when you did that? Maybe if you did based things again, maybe you'd be maybe have an easier time win in 2024 because maybe you can get progressives to vote for you.
It's been a lot more lazy. You no longer have Ron Klain, who was certainly a more progressive chief of staff, Now you got this corporate lobbyist goon who's running the show. And it's clear, it shows in the action. So Biden's not doing a bang-up job here. But at the same time, the bar has now been lowered so much that he looks like an absolute hero compared to what's going on in the Republican Party. And this is being reflected in all of the special elections that have happened recently. Democrats are overperforming by 10 percentage points. Now, why?
Think about that, guys. You guys are so radical. Democrats outperform you by 10 points when it comes to elections. 10-point swing because you're so radical. That should be obvious to you. You need to change your views because you're not winning.
Well, I think very simply it's because of the election denialism, the country still being, or excuse me, the party still being,
you're anti-democratic and you're hardcore far-right dipshit.
The Roe v. Wade extremism. I mean, that was one of the determinative factors in the midterm election.
You lost because of Roe v. Wade. If it wasn't overturned, you probably would have won. But you did that, and then you had to face the severe backlash and consequences because of it.
And they're paying for it. So, the Republicans have their
Get the
debate the other
Putler
day.
treatment.
They're sort of leaning into a lot of these crazy ideas politically, these far-right ideas when it comes to abortion. And this, they left the lane wide open for Biden to just dribble on in and make the world's easiest layup. So Biden and his team, they cut this ad. Watch.
Reproductive health care decisions are among the most personal a woman will ever make. They are choices that should be made by you and your doctor. And the last people who should be involved are these guys.
First of all, I'm the one that got rid of Roe v. Wade.
Florida Governor DeSantis quietly signed into law one of the nation's strictest abortion bans.
Governor DeSantis, you signed a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. I believe in a culture of life.
If I were president of the United States, I would literally sign the most conservative pro-life legislation that they can get through Congress.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is... Remember, these are the people who believe that if you're a woman and you're seeking an abortion, it should be legal to
President
murder
Biden
you.
and Vice President Harris are determined to restore Roe v. Wade, and they will never allow a national abortion ban to become law. As long as they are in office, decisions about your body will be made by you, not by them.
Unless you're in states where they banned it, of course, then Biden has really no authority on that whatsoever, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was still a devastating ad.
Yep.
So simple, straight to the
Look,
point.
it's a good ad. The normies are going to...
You guys are so radical, you make Dementia Joe look
There's
sane
no
in
doubt
comparison.
about it.
Like,
Now,
you should be
under
embarrassed
Obama,
when
they had
that's
a
shown to you.
supermajority, and they could have and should have
He
codified
can't
Roe
even,
versus
he can't
Wade
stay
back then.
awake during the day, and he still
And
is
now
more...
here we are.
Is able to
And
win on this
Biden
one.
hasn't gotten it through yet.
That's embarrassing.
But the fact of the matter is this.
Yeah.
Americans squarely blame Republicans for this and squarely blame the conservative Supreme Court. And this is being reflected
And you
in all
are
the
losing
elections since
because
then.
of
Guys,
it. Yay.
We had a direct vote
You've
in
been
Kansas on the issue of abortion.
because of it.
And abortion rights won by a significant margin. We
Every
had a
single
direct vote
time
in
a abortion referendum comes up, the pro-choice side always wins. Every time.
Yep.
Because most Americans agree with us. And do we need to bring up... How many more stories do we need to bring up of some woman that died or suffered grave injuries because they couldn't get abortions when they went through something really bad because of you fascist thugs? I'm
Ohio
tired of having to bring it up.
recently on this. And the pro-choice side won in a landslide.
Because we're the
So
reasonable
even
side.
in deep red states,
Yep,
when people are voting directly on this
exactly.
issue, they are unequivocal. They want the choice. Now, late term's a separate conversation. Even under Roe v. Wade, you had a ban on late-term abortion in many states. But Roe v. Wade was the correct framework. It was a moderate framework. It was the correct framework, and it's the framework that the American people agree with. And then now you have every single Republican sprinting as far as they can to the right and then shooting themselves in the foot. So Biden should be sending a thank you card to these Republicans for making him seem way more appealing than he actually is. Because
You're helping
gone
someone
off
who
the cliff
falls
with
asleep
their
all day
extremism. The only
win more
one
easier.
who
So
was
good job on that
making,
one.
A somewhat moderate sounding argument was like Nikki Haley and Doug Burgum, and Nikki Haley's argument was like, I don't think the woman should be killed. Like, I don't think they should be executed. And Burgum was like,
she thinks that women should be extrajudicially murdered.
Right thing, and it should just be left.
It's like that
to the states
Republican
and
a
the
few
federal
years
government.
back who tried
That's
to
the moderate position.
put
In
that
other
bill
words,
up
if
that
every
would
single
have
Republican state
banned
decided, I'm
abortion
gonna
in
ban
all
from moderate
cases
conception.
and
To
legalized
those guys,
murdering
it's like,
women who are
hey,
seeking
it's okay.
abortion.
They decided to do it, they can do it. So even the so-called moderate position among Republicans is an extremist position. The Democrats
They've
really
always
should
been
send
extreme,
a
though,
thank you
Kyle. You
card
know
to
that.
the Republicans because it is their extremism and their insanity that make the Democrats look so much more appealing than they actually are. Republicans are their own worst enemy. Like, all these candidates are their own worst enemy. Their
You're
base
like
is their
Trump.
own
You
worst
keep
enemy.
open your big fat mouth and
They
you keep
move
losing
them
because
so
of it.
far out of the American mainstream.
Hello,
It turns
Todd
off
Aiken
every
again.
independent, every normie, every moderate, even every center-right.
There's an old
If it's a
enemy.
legitimate
And we
rape,
just gotta
the
poll
female
the
bi
other
has
day,
ways to shut that whole thing
67% of
down.
independents say, yeah, Trump will
Yeah. God.
How are you gonna win with that in a general?
Someone
you're just not gonna do it. They didn't learn in the past 3 elections. They probably won't learn after the 4th.
They're never gonna learn.
Conclusive.
The only way they're gonna learn is when they're dead and can no longer implement their ideology. They're TFG. There's nothing we can say or do that's gonna ever change their mind on it. So only them dying or them never able to implement their power in whatever way is gonna stop them. That is it.
Hey y'all, do me a favor.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, what do you gotta say about that? Like that's so easy for Biden to win on that one. Like it's pretty bad.
Layup. As I said, literal layup.
Yeah, Biden could literally just sleep the entire day and he'd still win because he is not as insane as you people. Like, for fuck's sake.
Yep.
And like I said, just like Trump won't shut his mouth and he keeps losing because of it, you pro-life retards are going to keep losing because the majority of Americans don't agree with you. So either adapt or go away. All right, so now on to the next topic.
Last one. Trump refuses to prove he won 2020.
You know, guys, let's see. It's been almost 3 years now since the election, and Trump still insists that he won, and he has like and he says he has the evidence that'll prove that he won. Well, surely, if he has all this evidence, then surely he would tell us what it is, so maybe we could fix this stolen election he claims to be. So let's see. Will he do it? Well, let's see.
So the other day, Trump said on Truth Social that I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna prove once and for all that the election was stolen from me, your favorite president, better than Lincoln, better than Washington. He did this whole song and dance over on Truth Social saying, that's it, I got a report, it's a conclusive report. I think he said it's like 100 pages or something like that. And I will unveil it, and then all the charges must be dropped because this is no longer debatable. I won the election. And I was enjoying his tweet storm over there because...
All right, well, if you have proof, let's see it.
I want... Go ahead. I want to see what you got,
Yep,
dog.
let's see
Let
it.
me see what you got. It's guaranteed to be funny. It's guaranteed to be hilarious. It's guaranteed to be sourced from, like, Dinesh D'Souza's 2,000 Mules and the...
Hello, Dinesh D'Souza.
...right-wing blog.
Ah, yes, Dinesh D'Souza, the guy who claimed that the Democratic Party was founded by Cain after he killed Abel and went to a town. I wish I was joking.
Careful, you'll probably be anti-Indian for saying that.
I was like, hey, I'm your Huckleberry. Let me see all this.
He literally
made
that claim.
Oh
in
my!
one of his stupid documentaries.
Oh my gosh! Wow, what a Karen! Ooh, Idpol. I thought you guys were against Idpol.
See, it's so that I can go line for line and break it all down and have a grand old time, giggling and laughing and being jolly about how stupid it is and about how ineffectual his fight back is. So anyway, Fox News was entertaining this idea, and they were entertaining it seriously. Listen to this. This is hilarious.
So this 100-page report that's going to come out on Monday, the former president's going to drop it out at Bedminster, which is his golf resort just to the west of New York City. And the question is, what's going to be in it? Well, apparently it was, and this is according to the New York Times this morning, compiled at least in part by a woman by the name of Liz Harrington, and she has been one of his communications staff members. And apparently the document focuses on voting anomalies in the state of Georgia. And Ms. Harrington has been on X, formerly known as Twitter, and said, kind of giving us a preview, it said, Georgia has been among the most corrupt elections in the country, and they haven't gotten any better since 2020. They've gotten worse. Tune in Monday.
And he said on Truth Social, Donald Trump, they never went after those that rigged the election. They only went after those that fought to find the riggers. And in this indictment in Georgia, and all these indictments, it allows him to have discovery. So his lawyers will have discovery and will find out information. And I heard this morning, Brian, an attorney said, I think it was on Fox and Friends First, was saying the best argument he has is to tell the truth. And if he finds out that something did happen in the election, then he would have proof. And then maybe he could exonerate himself. What he has, we don't know. We'll find out on Monday morning at 11 o'clock.
Simply has
Except
nothing.
you won't, because he didn't
He's got
release
nothing.
Dickie McGee's axe. Okay, here we go. So Trump comes out, Truth Social. Rather than releasing the report on the rigged and stolen Georgia 2020 presidential election on Monday, My lawyers would prefer putting this, I believe, irrefutable and overwhelming evidence of election fraud and irregularities in formal legal filings as we fight to dismiss this disgraceful indictment by a publicity and campaign finance-seeking DA who sadly presides over record-breaking murder and violent crime area, Atlanta. Therefore, the news conference is no longer necessary. Going after Fani Willis because she's not being tough enough on violent crime is literally the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Every article I've read about her is the exact opposite. She's aggressively going after violent crime and gangs in particular. Okay, so he just completely and utterly and shamelessly and ruthlessly just makes shit up. Just
or maybe he's just stupid.
Right out of his ass. Just terrible Atlanta, weak on crime, record-breaking murder, violent crime,
Democratic, anti-democratic talking point, and also maybe somewhat, and also maybe a little bit of tinge of racism. We can't deny that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course
hey,
they go down the racism
maybe,
route.
Maybe
That's it. That's also part of their bread and butter. Remember?
So unbelievable. But here
I
he
have
is
irrefutable
saying,
evidence, but I'm not going to mention it right now.
Now, why is he not releasing it? I have
Sounds
no
about
doubt
right. It sounds
that
about
his lawyers
white.
Absolutely, positively begged and pleaded, and we're like, for the love of God, don't do this. He's lost like 100 freaking lawyers. Why? Because he doesn't listen to them. I'm sure all of them have been like, for the love of God, stop tweeting, stop saying shit. Stop doing witness intimidation.
He just cannot shut up.
Injustice.
How many times have we been saying this for years? He cannot shut up.
Shuddy.com, for the love of God.
He would save himself so much misery if he would just shut up.
I know, hilarious
but he
name.
can't do it.
He can't do it. He's incapable.
Oh yeah, he's going down on the...
just like pro-lifers can't stop losing.
The classified documents case that Trump is dunzo on that one. That's an open and shut type deal. But he doesn't listen. He doesn't listen to them. So this is the first time he actually has listened to them. But what's so funny is that he says, we are going to submit this in formal legal filings instead. So clearly, the lawyers were like, stop, no, don't do any of this. Get rid of that report is trash. It's bogus. Get it out of here. They're going to pick it apart like there's no tomorrow. And they were only able to talk him down to... all right, fine, submit it as a formal legal filing. But it's eventually, we're going to see it, and it's going to be laughed out of town. Oh, I can't wait for this thing to be released, man.
Yep.
I can't, because you got to understand something, guys. Literally all of the talking points that they use, fraudulent election, rigged election, actually there were 300,000 people who were dead who voted. Actually, they were all of these things are bogus. They've been debunked and mocked and laughed at ruthlessly.
For 3 years almost now, he still won't shut up.
It was like his indictment.
3 years.
They claimed X number of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dead people voted in state X. And they were like, upon investigation, we learned it was something like 6. Which, by the way, is more than I expected, right? Like, I thought there were literally 0, because they've done reports on election fraud previously, detailed studies on it, and they find that it's super duper rare and to be nearly non-existent. But they were like,
and of course, and also the studies show that we covered the amount of voter frauds that actually do happen. It's Republicans trying to prove that voting fraud is real by preventing voter fraud themselves.
Okay, look, fair enough. We found like 6
I remember that. That was.
They said it was tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And so I have no doubt this report is comical. This report is like One America News level garbage. I'm sure in this report, it might come. We're probably going to have another Dominion or Smartmatic lawsuit that comes as a result of this, because yet again you're slandering them, you're libeling them. Sidney Powell said like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela tried to throw the election at Joe Biden.
Even though he's dead.
Smartmatic and Dominion filed, they're like winning them, and that's so hard to prove libel or slander, defamation. But the claims are so absurd that it is defaming them effectively, and that they're winning some of these cases, or they're settling and getting a lot of money as a result of it, more money than they could ever imagine. And I'm sure that this report is a laughingstock, and his lawyers are smart enough to know it, and they're begging him, get rid of this thing. And he's like, fine, I'll agree to submit it. I'll agree to submit it in formal legal filings. Okay, great. So that'll be hilarious when we eventually see it anyway. And it's full of just total fucking charlatan garbage, utterly made up by some right-wing blogger named Based Groper 1488 or Based Groiper 1488, not Groper. Groiper
Based
1488.
Truth Killer, aka Aaron Dickless,
It's a point
who
that many
spent, I'm
people
not
keep
even
coming
kidding
back to,
you,
including
4
myself.
years over 50 NPC accounts regurgitating bullshit on Sam Cedar's YouTube comments section.
Ah, sounds like good old Alex Zeon, if you remember that troll.
You're going to be in court on trial
Vaguely?
over a lot of these rigged election things.
And Jimbo!
Well,
that's from like 10 years ago.
What you got? Go ahead. Oh, prove the election was rigged. Go ahead, big guy. You're in a court of law. Prove it was rigged. My guess is this is going to go just like the other over 60 court cases that he lost, where even, not just Republican judges, Trump-appointed judges laughed this stuff out of the courtroom. I really wish he did release it, but for once he listened to his lawyers. But we're still going to eventually see it, and it is going to be hilarious. Hey, y'all.
I cannot wait to see it. But yeah, we gotta say about all this proof, but we're not gonna show it.
Sounds about right.
That would've been funny, though.
Yeah, sounds about right for them. Sounds about right.
So yeah, Biden won, deal with it, run against him, and then hopefully lose once again to him. Or go to prison, too, so you can't run. Ooh, that would be even better. And, of course, that's right. Trumpsters have threatened to get violent if Trump gets elected. In prison. Good. Get violent, get killed, less conservative retards to deal with. Which would make America a much better place. So, yeah.
Definitely.
So, yeah, that is all the topics for this episode, guys. So, see you next time for episode 85.
Yep.